Rain lashed the windshield as a luxury car rolled to a stop beside a shivering woman and her child, stranded on the edge of an empty road. The millionaire CEO inside could have driven past everyone else did, but instead, he stepped out, umbrella in hand, and quietly opened his car door. Why did a man with everything pause for a stranger who had nothing? What lines are we really willing to cross when no one is watching? If you believe that a single, unexpected moment can shift everything we know about trust and kindness, join us, like, subscribe, or share your thoughts below. Sometimes, the smallest choices matter most. Rain hammered Los Angeles, sending streams down Wilshire Boulevard, soaking through the rush-hour city until everything seemed blurred and distant, lit by the restless pulse of headlights. At the curb in front of Century Plaza Hotel, Sofia Alvarez gripped her son's hand so tightly that Lucas whimpered, but she could not let go. 6 years old, small for his age. Lucas pressed into her side, the weight of his battered backpack dragging on his shoulder. Around them, umbrellas snapped shut and opened in the wind. Suits scurried beneath awnings, and cab drivers signaled but didn't stop for a woman and a child with no umbrella and nowhere to go. The hotel's glass doors glowed gold behind them, a thin line between the warm, bright interior and the edge of the street where Sofia stood. She had tried to slip in, but the lobby manager shook his head, cold and polite, telling her guests only, "Ma'am." He made sure she left, his voice quiet enough that no one noticed, but firm enough that she felt herself shrink. Sofia's clothes clung to her skin, and her hair dripped cold water down her neck. Lucas sniffed, rubbing his nose on the sleeve of his jacket. He asked in a whisper if they would get to sleep inside tonight. Sofia had no answer. Cabs rolled past, their lights shining on faces that looked away from her. Businessmen, travelers, a few teenagers with skateboards. Nobody paused. Some watched, curious, until they met Sofia's eyes, then looked through her as if she didn't exist. The storm pressed harder. Sofia tried not to shiver. In her purse, the last cash she had was barely enough for a cheap motel if she could even find a room. Their shelter for the past week, a rundown place in East Hollywood, had let them go at noon. She had nowhere else to go but forward. She could not cry, not with Lucas beside her. The black Tesla appeared suddenly at the curb, as if conjured by the city's unease. The window slid down, and a man's face appeared, pale in the washed-out light. He wore a crisp suit, the kind Sofia had only seen in magazine ads, and he watched her with a focus that was almost clinical. Michael Reed, though she didn't know his name yet, regarded her and Lucas in a way that felt both distant and curious. His hair was just touched with gray at the temples, and his voice was direct. "Do you need a ride?" He did not smile. His tone suggested he was not in the habit of being refused or questioned. Sofia hesitated, pulse pounding in her neck. She looked around for someone to intervene, some familiar face, but the hotel staff had vanished indoors, and the street belonged to strangers. Lucas tugged at her arm, his voice small. "Mama, please." Sofia made her decision. She opened the back door, helped Lucas in, and followed. The car's warmth hit her like a wave. She could smell the leather, feel the smoothness of the seat beneath her shaking hands. Michael nodded once, put the car in gear, and turned into the slow, relentless river of traffic. Inside the car, the world changed. Michael didn't look at her, eyes fixed on the rain-flecked windshield, but every movement checking the mirrors, adjusting the heat was efficient, purposeful. Sofia tried to calm her breathing, but her heart raced. She could feel every beat, every drop of water running down her arm. Lucas stared at the dashboard lights, silent except for the click of his seatbelt. The radio murmured the day's news stock markets down, storm warnings across the county, a tech CEO in talks to take his company public. Sofia let her eyes close for a moment, just to pretend that things were normal, that this was a carpool or a family drive home. At a stoplight, Michael glanced in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met. His were gray, steady, hard to read. He asked, "Where are you headed?" Sofia answered honestly, "We just need somewhere warm." He said nothing, only nodded, and turned left where most cars turned right, heading away from downtown. The silence grew dense. Sophia wondered what kind of man picked up strangers in storms. She wondered if she was being reckless, but the memory of the manager's eyes, judging, dismissive, pushed her to trust the unknown. As the city's lights fell away, the streets opened wider, lined with houses that looked nothing like the cramped apartments Sophia had known. They drove past Brentwood, where front yards were manicured and porch lights glowed steady. At each red light, Michael checked the mirrors, scanning the world outside like a man who trusted nothing, not even the quiet. Lucas leaned against Sophia's arm, his head heavy. The rhythm of the rain lulled him, and she smoothed his hair, whispering that everything would be all right. She tried to believe it. Michael's phone rang, the screen flashing with a name Sophia didn't catch. He answered briefly, his voice tight. "I'll be home soon." "No, it's fine. Just hold dinner." He hung up before the person could respond, then returned to silence. Sophia listened to the windshield wipers, the hush of tires on wet asphalt. She wanted to ask questions but didn't dare. Every so often, Michael glanced at the rear view, as if trying to understand what she and Lucas were, or how they had ended up here. They passed Pepperdine University, the last of the campus lights shining through the fog. Michael finally spoke again, his voice softer but still distant. "You and your son look exhausted. I live close by. Come to my place, just for tonight." It wasn't a request. It sounded like an order, the sort people didn't refuse. Sophia looked at Lucas, saw that he was already half asleep, his breath fogging the window. She nodded, the words catching in her throat. "Thank you." The Tesla turned onto a long, winding drive bordered by eucalyptus and iron gates. Michael pressed a button, and the gates opened silently, swallowing them into darkness. Sophia tried to calm her nerves, but every part of her was braced for disappointment, for some new indignity or suspicion. She wondered what this man wanted, if kindness ever came without a price in a city like this. She felt her hands tremble, and she pressed them into her lap to hide it. The house appeared slowly glass and stone, lit from within. Sophia could see the ocean beyond, waves shrouded in mist. The car stopped under the covered entry. Michael turned off the engine. He did not look at her as he got out, simply walked around to open Lucas's door. The boy blinked, confused, and let Michael lift him gently, carrying him to the front steps. Sophia followed, shoulders tight, rain still dripping from her clothes. Inside, the warmth was real, and the silence deep. Mrs. Evans appeared, offering towels and a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. Michael gave a quiet order to prepare a guest room. Sophia could feel the curiosity in the way the staff watched her, could feel the old shame and hope rising together. Lucas clung to her side, the weight of the night pressing down. As Michael led them down a wide hall lined with photographs, Sophia caught a glimpse of a young girl with dark curls in Michael's arms. The image ached with memory. Michael saw her looking and looked away, his jaw tightening. Sophia wondered if she had crossed a line, if some wound had been opened by their arrival. In the guest room, Sophia tucked Lucas into bed, drying his hair and whispering stories of home. He fell asleep quickly, clutching her hand. Sophia sat at the edge of the bed, listening to the storm ease outside. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She only knew that, for the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone in the night. The quiet held its own questions, and in that uncertain hush, something new began. The Tesla's headlights pierced through sheets of rain as it wound up the steep drive of the Reed estate. For a moment, Sophia could only see her reflection in the glass, a thin face, eyes wide and tired, hair pressed to her cheeks. Lucas dozed against her shoulder, small and trusting, as the car glided through iron gates and rolled to a stop beneath a portico. The house that rose before them was nothing like anything Sophia had known. It was all stone, glass, and steel, perched on a rise above the Pacific. The night air carried the ocean's salt. She stepped out carefully, shoes squelching on the flagstone. Michael opened the front door, not waiting for anyone to catch up. His movements were brisk, almost impatient. Sophia's shoes squeaked on imported marble as she followed him into the grand foyer. Warmth spread instantly, so different from the wet world outside that she could almost forget the storm. The chandelier above sparkled with a cold light. Every corner of the room gleamed with wealth. A wall of glass revealed waves breaking far below. Modern art hung in heavy frames. A spiral staircase soared upward. Lucas took it all in silently, eyes darting from the stair rail to the massive fireplace. He gripped Sophia's coat tighter. Mrs. Evans appeared at once, a woman in her early 60s with gray hair pulled into a knot, her uniform crisp and clean. She offered towels and a mug of cocoa for Lucas, her manner careful, not unfriendly, but practiced. She looked to Michael for every cue. "Your room is ready. Mr. Reed, will your guests need anything else?" Michael glanced at Sophia, a flicker of something worry, or maybe just calculation in his eyes. "Just set them up in the library suite for now." His voice was businesslike, no hint of welcome. Sophia thanked Mrs. Evans, her words soft, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She was painfully aware of her patched jeans and Lucas's worn-out sneakers. The grandeur of the house made her feel impossibly small. Mrs. Evans led them down a hallway lined with photographs, family gatherings on the beach, holidays, a young girl with a wild smile and curls. Sophia paused at the images. She guessed it was Michael's daughter, though he hadn't mentioned her. Lucas asked who the girl was, but Sophia only shook her head. Their room was tucked in a quiet corner, lined with shelves of old books and more photos. The bed was impossibly soft. Sophia wrapped Lucas in a towel, drying his hair as he fought sleep. "It's like a castle, Mama," he murmured. Sophia brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, hiding her worry behind a small smile. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "We'll be okay, I promise. Downstairs." Michael paced in his office, rain sliding down the glass behind him. He spoke in low, clipped tones on his cell, voice tight with frustration. Something about a deal gone sideways, investors needing reassurance. The conversation was private, but his agitation bled through the walls, a reminder of how different his world was from hers. As the evening wore on, Sophia unpacked what little she had: 2 sets of clothes, a plastic bag of toiletries, and a small photo of Lucas as a baby. She placed it by the bed, an anchor in this world of polished surfaces. Outside, thunder rolled far off the coast. Sophia wondered if Michael regretted bringing them here. She wondered if accepting help from a man like him would only make it harder to stand on her own again. Lucas drifted off, thumb pressed against his cheek. Sophia stayed awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a wealthy home at night, the hum of a distant elevator, the soft buzz of security cameras, footsteps on carpet somewhere down the hall. At one point, she heard voices staff speaking in low tones, footsteps pausing outside their door. Her pulse raced. She tensed, half expecting someone to tell her they had made a mistake. The footsteps faded. Silence returned. Sophia lay down beside Lucas, pulling the blanket to her chin. She tried to breathe evenly, willing herself to believe this was safety, not another temporary shelter. The storm had passed, but she still felt exposed, her future as fragile as the glass that separated them from the ocean's dark reach. Late that night, Lucas stirred, whispering, "Are we safe here?" Sophia squeezed his hand, feeling the ache of responsibility settle deeper into her chest. "We're safe. Just sleep," she said, though she wasn't sure. She watched moonlight stretch across the wall, wondering what the morning would bring, if this strange new world might become a place she could trust, or if she was only standing in the foyer of someone else's life, waiting to be shown the door. Morning arrived over Malibu with a gray quietness that crept through the glass walls of the Reed estate. Sophia rose early, guided more by nerves than habit. She tried to smooth her hair, change into her cleanest shirt, and shake off the feeling that she might not belong here, no matter how gentle the sheets or soft the light. Lucas was already awake, feet swinging from the kitchen stool, his laughter surprising her as he played with a napkin folded by Mrs. Evans. The kitchen itself was vast and modern, all stone and steel. But in that hour, it felt smaller, just the aroma of coffee, the hush of the ocean, the gentle patience of a child at ease. Mrs. Evans handed Lucas a glass of orange juice and gave Sophia a quick nod. Her eyes carried a question Sophia couldn't answer. Michael entered in a dark suit, tie in place, every inch the CEO. But there was something distracted in his movements. He poured himself coffee and didn't look at Sophia, eyes scanning headlines on his phone. When Lucas greeted him, Michael offered a brief smile, polite but distant. On the refrigerator, a photograph caught Sophia's eye, a little girl with wild curls, beaming in the sunlight, her arms wrapped around Michael's neck. The picture was taped at the corner, faded by time, but clearly loved. The morning routine had a rhythm, Lucas helping set the table. Sophia careful not to disrupt the choreography of the staff. She was aware of glances, some curious, some skeptical. One young housekeeper lingered in the doorway, her eyes sliding over Sophia's clothes, her lips pursed. Michael's phone rang again, a sharp sound that broke the air. He answered, voice clipped and cool, and left the kitchen mid-sentence. Mrs. Evans leaned closer to Lucas, showing him how to slice a strawberry. The moment should have been gentle, but Sophia felt the divide growing wider, as if every kindness here required a password she didn't have. When Michael returned, he paused at the kitchen threshold, hands in his pockets, watching Sophia clear the plates. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, Michael said, "The guest house needs someone to manage it. Bookings, upkeep, basic hospitality. It's a temporary arrangement just until you're back on your feet." The words landed between them, practical but not unkind. Sophia bristled at the offer, unsure if it was pity, obligation, or simply business. "I don't take charity," she replied, her tone firmer than she intended. Michael met her gaze. "It's not charity. I need someone I can trust. You need stability. That's all." His voice was measured, but in his eyes, Sophia saw a flicker of something, maybe regret, or hope, or simply the weight of his own history. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. She could see the logic, and beneath it, the challenge. This was not a gift. It was a test. She accepted the job, quietly promising herself she would not give anyone reason to doubt her place. Michael gave a single nod, then glanced at Lucas, his expression softening for just a moment before he turned away, picking up his briefcase and car keys. "I'll be back late," he said to Mrs. Evans, not looking at Sophia. He left quickly, the front door closing with a soft click that echoed through the halls. Sophia stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes with careful hands, her mind racing. She was no longer just a guest. She was an employee, temporary, uncertain, and under the scrutiny of a house that measured everything. As she dried her hands, she caught the sound of hushed voices from the hallway. Mrs. Evans was on the phone, her tone sharp. "Yes, another stray. This one has a child." The words stung, but Sophia recognized the warning. She would have to prove herself not just to Michael, but to every person who believed she didn't belong here. When the dishes were done, Sophia stepped onto the patio and watched the Pacific roll in beneath a pale sky. She tried to picture a future in this place, wondered what she would have to sacrifice to keep Lucas safe, and how long she could balance on the thin edge between gratitude and pride. The sea seemed endless, and somewhere behind her, a life she could never quite reclaim waited for her to make a choice. She closed her eyes and listened to Lucas's laughter from inside the kitchen, letting herself hope that, just maybe, she might find a way through. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the guest house, turning the dust in the air to slow-moving gold. Sophia worked in silence, feeling every creak of the floorboards beneath her shoes. The space felt too beautiful for comfort stone fireplace, whitewashed beams, linen curtains tied back with silk cords. For all the elegance, it was clear no one had lived here for months. Boxes of folded towels sat untouched. There was a faint scent of lavender and wood polish, but beneath it lingered something lonelier. A hush that reminded Sophia of closed doors and things left unsaid. Lucas had found the small walled garden just outside and was chasing a butterfly, his laughter bouncing off the old stone. Sophia watched him for a moment through the glass, letting herself smile, then turned back to the work. She dusted shelves, opened all the windows to let the sea air in, and stacked linens in the hallway closet. When she pulled open a lower drawer of the desk, her hand touched something soft and thin, a small, spiral-bound journal, its cover decorated with colored pencil hearts. Sophia flipped through the pages and found sketches childlike but full of feeling. There was a swing hanging from a sycamore tree, a woman holding a little girl, a dog asleep under a sunbeam. The handwriting was careful, the spelling earnest. She read a line, "Dad says I can sleep out here tonight. It feels like camping, but better." The voice on the page was open, trusting, and painfully alive. Sophia's throat tightened. These were Michael's daughter's memories, written before the silence settled over this house. She set the journal aside gently, as if afraid to disturb a ghost. Mid-morning brought a knock at the side door. Sophia wiped her hands on her jeans and opened it to find Mrs. Kim, the head of the Malibu Homeowners Association. She wore a pink scarf and crisp blazer, her smile polished and cool. "Good morning," she said, glancing past Sophia into the tidy rooms. "I hope you're settling in. We don't often see new faces at Reed Estate." Her tone made it clear she didn't expect them to stay. Mrs. Kim asked pointed questions about Sophia's last job, Lucas's school, how long she planned to make use of the guest house. Her words were soft, but her meaning sharp. "We try to maintain certain standards here in Malibu. I'm sure you understand." Sophia answered simply, refusing to apologize for being here. Still, the old feeling of being measured and found wanting rose in her chest. Mrs. Kim left with a warning to Michael about mixing business with personal affairs, her gaze lingering on Lucas, who peeked at them from behind the garden gate, the rest of the day. Sophia worked harder, as if she could scrub away judgment with elbow grease. She watered the plants, swept the flagstones, folded every towel just so. Lucas drew pictures at the kitchen table, occasionally running outside to report on new flowers he'd found. The afternoon drifted by, calm but weighted with what Sophia didn't say. As dusk fell, Michael walked across the lawn and found Sophia sitting outside, the little journal in her lap. He asked, voice softer than before, "How much have you seen?" She met his eyes and told him the truth. Something in Michael shifted a quiet grief, raw and unguarded, flickered across his face. "She was my daughter," he said, words careful. "Sometimes I stand right here, thinking I'll see her come running out that door." The silence stretched between them, not empty, but shared. Sophia offered the journal back. Michael shook his head. "Keep it. For Lucas, if he wants to read it." The moment passed quietly, but something between them changed a small trust, a crack in the wall. The evening grew still. Sophia closed up the house, turned out the lights, and checked that every window was locked, outside, down the driveway. A car sat idling in the shadows, headlights off, engine low. Sophia watched from behind the curtains, heart uneasy, as the car waited longer than it should have before finally pulling away into the dark. Dawn crept into the guest house, gray and hesitant. Sophia woke to Lucas tugging at her sleeve, his eyes still heavy with sleep, a strand of hair stuck to his cheek. She pressed her palm to his forehead, reassured by the gentle warmth, and listened to the soft movements of the house beyond the window. Distant voices, the hush of running water, the shuffling of slippers on tile life, continuing in a rhythm she hadn't found yet. Breakfast felt different that morning. Mrs. Evans was all politeness and reserve, her eyes never lingering long on Sophia, her voice quieter. Michael entered, suit immaculate, but his phone kept buzzing. Each time, his attention flickered away, his jaw clenched just a little tighter. Lucas munched cereal in silence, drawing patterns in the condensation on his glass. Sophia tried to make conversation, but the air felt full of unsaid things. Mrs. Evans cleared dishes a little too briskly, hands tight on the plates. After breakfast, Sophia walked outside with Lucas. The air was sharp with the scent of eucalyptus. At the edge of the garden, She spotted fresh tire tracks, deep ruts pressed into the morning mud by the guest house gate. They hadn't been there yesterday. She felt a prickling on the back of her neck, like being watched from somewhere just out of sight. Lucas pulled on her sleeve, eager to show her the drawing he'd finished at breakfast, a picture of the guest house with bright windows and stick figure people holding hands. "It's us." "Mama," he whispered, as if afraid the image might vanish if he spoke too loudly. Sophia felt a flutter of hope, a reminder of why she had fought so hard to keep moving, to keep searching for a safe place. A familiar voice startled her. Mrs. Kim appeared on the path, posture erect, lips drawn thin. Her smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Sophia. I wanted to see how you're settling in. Michael didn't mention how long you'd be with us." Her questions were as much an accusation as an inquiry. Where had Sophia worked before? Did she plan to enroll Lucas in school here? How long would she make use of the Reed Estate's hospitality? Sophia answered with careful honesty, but the old sense of being weighed, measured, and found lacking returned with every word. Just as Mrs. Kim pressed a little too hard, Michael's voice cut in from the main house. "That's enough, Mrs. Kim. Sophia's staying as long as she needs to. This is my property." His words were crisp, each one drawing a line in the sand. "Mrs." Kim bristled, but gave a tight nod before walking away, her heels clicking sharp warnings on the stone. For a brief moment, Michael and Sophia exchanged a look, solidarity mixed with unease. Power had shifted, but the ground felt unsteady beneath them. Sophia led Lucas back inside. She called an old friend in the city, hoping for advice or maybe a lead on a job, but the call rang out to voicemail. She stared at her phone, feeling suddenly alone, as if the ocean's hush outside had seeped into her chest. Lucas colored quietly at the kitchen table, sensing the change in mood. That afternoon, Michael's lawyer, Mr. Parker, arrived. He wore an expensive suit and an expression that never fully settled into a smile. He shook hands with Michael, but when he turned to Sophia, his gaze was appraising part curiosity, part caution. His words, when he spoke, were just loud enough for her to hear. You never really know people's motives. Michael. Even the best intentions can hide all sorts of things. He carried files and spoke in legal terms about the estate, but his tone was a warning wrapped in advice. Sophia listened, understanding she was being weighed again this time, not just by neighbors, but by the very people she depended on for shelter. Michael's trust in her, fragile and new, seemed to shrink beneath the scrutiny. Later, Lucas asked if he could show Mr. Parker his drawing. The lawyer looked down, offered a tight smile, then returned to his briefcase. The sun was fading when Sophia went back to the guest house, arms full of folded laundry. She noticed something white on the floor by the door, a plain envelope, no name on the front. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single slip of paper, the message typed and unsigned. "You don't belong here. Leave before it's too late." Sophia looked up at the pale sky, feeling the wind off the ocean and the threat beneath the words in her hand. She pressed the note flat on the table, eyes on the windows, wondering who else was watching, and if there was anyone left she could trust. Evening settled quietly over the Reed estate, the sky turning from gold to blue, the Pacific lost in a veil of fog. In the guest house, the day's noise faded into the soft ticking of a wall clock and the distant crash of waves. Sophia sat at the old oak desk, a stack of folders in front of her. Mrs. Evans had left them with instructions inventory, guest records, the kind of work that grounded Sophia's hands even as her mind wandered. Lucas drew quietly on the rug, the box of colored pencils beside him. As Sophia flipped through papers, a photograph slipped loose and drifted onto the desk. She picked it up, her breath catching. Michael, years younger, his hair less gray, his smile unguarded, stood in the center. He held a girl in his arms, her hair a wild cloud of curls, her head thrown back in laughter. Behind them, just out of focus, stood a woman with tired eyes and a protective stance. The backdrop was unmistakable, the backyard of the estate, the same garden beds Lucas had played in that afternoon, the old sycamore tree standing sentinel. Sophia ran her thumb along the edge of the photo, feeling the ache of a story she could only guess. Michael's footsteps approached, measured and slow. He stopped at the door, the evening light tracing the lines on his face. His gaze dropped to the photo in Sophia's hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. The usual distance he carried seemed to waver. He entered the room, eyes never leaving the image. She was my daughter, Amelia. His voice was low, the words shaped by a grief that had settled into the grain of his life. It was a long time ago. My marriage didn't survive it. I haven't let anyone stay out here since. He spoke without self-pity, but the cost of each sentence was visible, his shoulders rigid, his hand curling into a fist at his side. Sophia listened, the photograph balanced on her knees. She felt the weight of her own losses settle beside his, a recognition that hurt in its simplicity. "I'm sorry," she said, voice soft, and meant it. She offered to put the photo away, but Michael shook his head. "Sometimes it's good to remember. Sometimes it's too much." The silence stretched, awkward but honest. The air shifted as Lucas wandered in, dragging his blanket, eyes half closed. "Can you read me a story?" he asked. The words directed at Michael. Sophia tensed, uncertain, but Michael surprised them both. He took the book from Lucas's hand and sat on the edge of the bed, his voice growing softer as he read. The story was simple, a dog looking for home, but the moment was anything but. Sophia watched as Lucas curled against the pillows, and for the first time, she saw Michael set aside his grief, just for a few pages, to be present in a way that mattered. Rain began again, tapping softly at the windows. The three of them sat together, not quite a family, but something quieter, a fragile truce. When the story ended, Lucas drifted off, and Michael handed the book back to Sophia. His eyes met hers, gratitude and regret flickering there, a promise unspoken. The night seemed peaceful until the sound of tires on gravel broke the spell. Sophia looked out the window. A police cruiser rolled slowly past the front gate, headlights sweeping the drive, pausing as if searching for something or someone. Sophia's heart thudded. Someone had called the authorities. Someone had decided the new residents needed checking. Michael stood beside her, jaw set, and watched the cruiser disappear down the road, both of them wondering what might come next. Morning at the Reed estate was marked by a tension that clung to the fog rolling in from the Pacific. Sophia woke to a gentle knock at the guest house door, her heart skipping. Lucas pressed close, sensing her unease. She glanced out the window and saw a Los Angeles police cruiser idling at the iron gate, an officer standing straight-backed beside it. His uniform was crisp, badge glinting in the early light, his posture calm but unmistakably official. Michael met the officer on the drive, posture rigid, a mask of corporate politeness settling over his features. From the kitchen, Mrs. Evans watched through the curtains, worry etched on her face. Sophia gathered her ID and Lucas's school paperwork, her hands shaking. When the officer approached, his manner was courteous, but not warm. "We've received a call from a neighbor," he said, glancing at Sophia and Lucas. "They're concerned about guests staying here. I'm sure you understand we have to check." Michael's voice was smooth, practiced from years of boardrooms and negotiations. "This is my guest. Her son and I have an arrangement. If you'd like to see identification or tour the property, I'd be happy to oblige." He showed the officer his driver's license and business card, gestured toward the guest house, and kept his tone even just a hint of ice beneath the professionalism. The officer nodded, took notes, then turned to Sophia. He asked how long she'd been there, if she felt safe, if everything was as it should be. Sophia answered honestly, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Lucas clung to her leg, silent but watchful. The officer's questions were fair, but left Sophia with the sting of being judged for needing help at all. After a final exchange, he tipped his cap and said, "Looks like everything's in order." If you have any concerns, you can call the station. We're just doing our job." As the cruiser pulled away, Lucas burst into tears, clinging to Sophia as if the world might shift beneath him at any moment. She crouched to comfort him, whispering reassurances she only half believed. Michael retreated to his home office, slamming the door, his frustration leaking out in the muffled thud of his footsteps. In the stillness, Sophia felt the scrutiny of Malibu tighten around her, the sense that she and Lucas could be forced out at any moment, no matter how hard they tried to fit in. Later that morning, Mrs. Evans appeared with a cup of tea. She set it on the table and sat across from Sophia, her face gentler than it had been in days. "I owe you an apology," she said, her hands twisting in her lap. "When I first arrived in California, I didn't know a soul, cleaned rooms in downtown saved every penny. Sometimes I forget where I started. People around here, they act like they've always belonged. Most of us are just pretending." Her voice held a humility that made Sophia's chest ache. Sophia listened, the distance between them closing with each word. She realized then that the staff were not a single unit, but people each with their own scars and private battles. The housekeeper's story shifted something inside her, a recognition that everyone here had once been an outsider. The careful lines Sophia had drawn between us and them began to blur. The day continued with small, cautious kindnesses. Lucas drew pictures for Mrs. Evans, who laughed quietly and showed him how to fold paper boats. Sophia tended the garden, grateful for the rhythm of work. But as she led Lucas along the flower beds, she caught sight of Mr. Parker, Michael's lawyer, standing inside the main house. He was on the phone, gaze fixed on them through the window, his expression unreadable. His attention lingered a moment too long, his lips barely moving as he spoke. A cold shiver ran through Sophia. There was something about Mr. Parker's watchfulness that unsettled her, a calculation behind his eyes, a sense that his role extended beyond mere legal counsel. She tucked Lucas's hand into hers and turned away, determined not to let fear gain ground. That night, as she tried to sleep, shadows stretched across the ceiling. Michael had barely spoken at dinner, his face drawn, lost in thought. Sophia lay awake, replaying every moment, every glance, every question. She couldn't shake the suspicion that the story Michael told about his past left too much unsaid, and that whatever danger waited in the darkness, it was already closer than she dared admit. Saturday arrived with a restless sky, morning fog lingering along Pacific Coast Highway as Michael prepared for the tech industry fundraiser. He asked Sophia to come with him, his tone more businesslike than kind, but she sensed the request was something closer to a plea. She hesitated, looking down at her worn jeans, and Michael, without a word, handed her a garment bag from Mrs. Evans, a borrowed navy dress, simple but elegant. Sophia changed in the guest house, smoothing the unfamiliar fabric with trembling fingers, her reflection strange in the gilded mirror. The Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills radiated a kind of money Sophia had only glimpsed on television. Crystal chandeliers caught the light, and everywhere, men and women in sharp suits clustered in tight groups, voices lowered but intent. The ballroom gleamed city council members at one table, venture capitalists at another, clusters of tech journalists drifting through. The air smelled of champagne and ambition. Michael introduced Sophia to a board member, then an investor, always as a friend who's helping manage the guest house renovation. Each handshake was measured, each smile polite but uncertain. Sophia felt the weight of eyes on her back, the curiosity, the skepticism, the questions whispered behind manicured hands. She could almost hear their thoughts. Who is she? Why is she here? Dinner was a gauntlet. The rival CEO, Valerie Huang of Quantum Digital, sat just a few seats away, her laughter edged with steel. As dessert was served, Valerie leaned over and said, just loud enough for the table to hear, "Michael, I admire your commitment to social causes. First the foundation, now charity work at home." Laughter rippled through the board members, some nervous, some delighted to see someone challenge the unflappable Michael Reed. Sophia's face flushed hot, but she pressed her hands to her lap and willed herself to breathe, the silverware trembling faintly in her grasp. Michael didn't flinch. He set his fork down, voice calm but carrying across the table. I believe in giving people a chance sometimes. That's all it takes to change a life. His gaze never left Valerie's, and for a moment, the mood at the table shifted. Some guests fell silent, uncertain which side to take. After dinner, Sophia slipped out to the lobby to collect herself. She stood near a display of orchids, listening as two executives from another company passed by, their voices low but sharp. She's not family, one whispered. You know what this looks like. He's got a type found someone to dig for gold, or maybe she's running from something. The other replied, he's always had blind spots. First his wife, now this. Sophia's stomach twisted, shame and anger competing for space. Before she could move, Michael appeared behind her. He'd heard enough. He stepped between Sophia and the men, his words clipped, no longer hiding his frustration. If you have something to say it to me. Otherwise, keep your opinions to yourselves. The confrontation drew attention, conversations slowing as people sensed a new current in the room. Michael's defense of Sophia was not just personal, it was public, a statement that he would not be cowed by rumor or status. The car ride back to Malibu was quiet at first, headlights carving the darkness, the city's glitter receding behind them. Finally, Sophia asked, why do you do this for me? You know what people think. Why risk everything for a stranger? Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. He spoke without looking at her. After my daughter died, and my marriage fell apart, I stopped believing people could change. I stopped believing I could change. But I see you fighting for your son, for yourself, every day. Maybe helping you is the only thing that makes sense anymore. Maybe it's the only way I know how to keep believing. The admission broke the silence between them, a thread of understanding weaving its way through all that was unspoken. Sophia rested her head against the window, the city lights fading behind the clouds. As they turned into the Reed estate, Sophia saw Mrs. Kim standing at the gate, flanked by two men in dark suits. Their faces were set, eyes hard. Mrs. Kim stepped forward as Michael slowed the car, her voice loud and unwavering. We need to discuss what's best for this neighborhood. Some people here are worried. It's time you thought about protecting your reputation and ours. Sophia's breath caught. She reached for Lucas's drawing in her purse, fingers trembling, knowing this was a confrontation she could no longer sidestep. The air in Malibu was heavy with salt and scrutiny as Mrs. Kim approached the Reed Estate's gates, two members of the Homeowners Association walking at her side. Their shoes crunched over the gravel with a certainty that belonged to people who'd never questioned their place here. Michael was already outside, coat thrown over his shoulders despite the lingering warmth of late afternoon. His posture was all corporate composure, but his eyes betrayed impatience. Sophia watched from the guest house window. Lucas pressed to her side, their breath fogging the glass. She could make out the clipped edges of Mrs. Kim's words, nothing overt, but each syllable wrapped in suggestion. When Michael opened the gate, Mrs. Kim greeted him by his full name, voice carrying just enough volume for the neighbors out on their morning walks to overhear. She spoke of standards, security, and the importance of protecting the neighborhood's reputation. The words landed like stones. Michael's response was measured. He cited property law, emphasizing his right to host whomever he chose. I've done everything by the book, he said, voice steady, and I expect to be treated accordingly. The two men with Mrs. Kim exchanged glances. One, a real estate attorney, referenced the association bylaws. Exceptions can be revoked, even for owners. When there's cause, the threat was there, veiled but unmistakable. Mrs. Kim's attention turned to Sophia, who had stepped out with Lucas, unwilling to hide but unable to stand tall. It's only natural for us to ask questions, Mrs. Kim said, her smile brittle. These are our children's lives, too. Background checks are standard in this community. She glanced pointedly at Lucas. We'd hate for the board to have to intervene, for a heartbeat. Sophia could not breathe. The old humiliation rose up, memories of slights in other neighborhoods, jobs lost, questions asked behind her back. Michael's face darkened. He moved forward, positioning himself between Sophia and the group. "Enough," he said. "You've made your concerns clear. If you have legal business, send it through counsel." The association members stiffened, offering a final "we'll be in touch" before departing. Michael lingered at the gate, eyes tracking their retreat. Only when they were out of sight did he turn to Sophia. For the first time, the mask slipped. He reached for Lucas's shoulder. "Gentle. They won't touch you," he promised. But Sophia heard the uncertainty behind the words. Inside, the house felt colder. Sophia sat with Lucas at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. Her voice was low, almost apologetic. "I'm not used to being the problem," she said. "Not anymore." Michael watched her, then knelt beside Lucas. "People here think they're safe if everyone else is the same. They're wrong. Difference is what keeps us honest." There was something in his tone, something Sophia hadn't expected. Not pity, but a tired kind of respect. Night pressed down, quiet but relentless. Lucas had trouble sleeping, sitting by the window, watching headlights pass along the road. "Are we leaving?" he whispered. Sophia pulled him close. "Not if I can help it," she said, willing herself to believe. As dawn edged in, a courier's van pulled into the drive. Mrs. Evans received a sealed envelope, her eyes widening at the letterhead White and Friedman, one of Los Angeles' oldest law firms. She carried it to Sophia without a word. The letter was addressed to Sophia Alvarez, her name printed in crisp black ink. The weight of the paper in her hand felt heavier than anything she'd carried since the day she left her old life behind. Sophia stared at it, heart pounding, knowing that everything was about to change again. The morning sun barely warmed the Malibu coast as Sophia turned the crisp envelope over in her hands. The return address, printed in black ink, was unmistakable: White and Friedman, a law firm that had made headlines for its high-profile cases. Inside, a letter more clinical than personal waited for her. The legalese was sharp, leaving no comfort between the lines. An anonymous party had requested a formal review of her guardianship of Lucas. The complaint cited her transient living arrangement at the Reed estate, questioning whether it provided a stable environment for a child. The letter was signed with the sort of cold, practiced flourish that made Sophia's stomach twist. For a moment, she sat at the kitchen table unmoving, the letter shaking in her hand. Lucas, still in pajamas, patted over and leaned against her arm. "Is it bad news?" he asked quietly. She smoothed his hair, summoning a smile. "It's just paperwork, honey, grown-up stuff." But the words rang hollow even to her. Michael appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, catching sight of the letter's heading. He didn't bother with pretense. He pulled out a chair, sat across from her, and read in silence. "I know these people," he said finally, voice low. "They're expensive, and they don't make threats lightly." Sophia tried to keep her hands steady, but her mind spun with questions. Was this Mrs. Kim's doing, or someone else from the neighborhood, emboldened by whispers and prejudice, determined not to fold? Sophia called the number on the letter. The receptionist transferred her to a paralegal, who spoke in circles, nothing concrete, only that an investigation would be forthcoming, and that someone from Child Protective Services might reach out. After the call, she stared at the receiver for a long minute, fighting the urge to cry. Lucas sat across from her, knees pulled up to his chest, watching. Mrs. Evans entered quietly and placed a folder on the table, labeled Guest House Expenses. Inside, mixed among receipts, was a slip of lined paper in unfamiliar handwriting. "Don't trust everyone here." Sophia blinked at the note. She looked up and caught Mrs. Evans's gaze, a flicker of warning, or maybe regret. Sophia slipped the note into her pocket, her nerves thrumming. That afternoon, Michael arranged for his own family attorney, Ms. Klein, to meet with Sophia. Ms. Klein was brisk, efficient, and didn't waste time on false reassurances. "This is intimidation. pure and simple, she said. But she warned Sophia to expect visits from officials, perhaps even reporters. Stay calm. Tell the truth. Let us handle the rest. The plan gave Sophia a sliver of hope, but the fear didn't loosen its grip. As evening fell, the estate felt tighter, the spaces between rooms filled with invisible tension. Staff moved quietly, conversations trailing off when Sophia entered a room. Even Lucas seemed subdued, drawing alone in the guest house living room, coloring a picture of a house with wide windows and thick walls. Michael checked on Sophia just after dinner, his presence softer than usual. "I'm sorry you're going through this here," he said. For once, he looked uncertain, guilt and concern shadowing his face. "I'll do everything I can." Sophia nodded, grateful but keenly aware that some battles could only be fought alone. That night, after tucking Lucas in, Sophia watched the driveway from behind a curtain. Just after midnight, a car rolled slowly to the end of the estate's drive. Headlights off, engine humming in the dark. It idled for a long minute before easing away, its silhouette swallowed by Pacific fog. Sophia's fear sharpened into resolve. She would fight, whatever it took, to keep her son and her new life safe, no matter how many letters or cars appeared in the night. Linda Cho pulled into the driveway mid-morning, her hybrid humming quietly as she stepped out with a leather briefcase and an air of practiced authority. She moved through the Reed estate with purpose, greeting Mrs. Evans and nodding at Lucas, who watched her from behind Sophia's legs, a crayon clutched tight in one fist. Sophia was waiting in the living room, hands folded, nerves visible in every gesture. Linda's voice was brisk, but not unfriendly. She introduced herself, explained the review process, and reassured Sophia that honesty and clarity mattered more than polished answers. They sat at the round table, sunlight slanting across papers and notepads. Linda asked about old addresses, the abrupt move from Arizona, the job Sophia had cycled through, Lucas's early years, and the court orders that had kept his father at bay. Sophia recounted her story, leaving a man whose anger grew more dangerous by the month, scraping by in diners and daycares, always worried about bills, but never wavering on Lucas's school attendance or his need for safety. When she described the months in Venice, where the smallest apartment brought the most peace, Linda listened quietly, jotting notes and pausing only to clarify a date or ask for a document. There were moments when Sophia's voice shook, but she kept going, determined not to let fear win. After the interview, Linda moved to the main house to speak privately with Michael. She'd already looked into the law firm's complaint, cross-referencing names and connections. "It's harassment, designed to rattle you," she told him, but her expression was serious. "Still, they know things that aren't public. Someone close is leaking details." Michael stiffened at the warning. He glanced through the window at Mr. Parker, his estate attorney, who'd been unusually attentive to the guest house records, making calls that grew shorter and more secretive by the day. Inside the kitchen, Mrs. Evans brought Sophia tea and sat across from her, folding her hands. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said quietly, "but you need to know this place keeps secrets. Some help, some hurt." Sophia nodded, wondering if the older woman's warnings pointed toward Parker or someone else entirely. The tension inside the estate built with every hour. Michael's meetings with the HOA turned more formal, the threat of a lawsuit hanging in every sentence. Rumors reached the Reed Tech board, and Michael received a carefully worded email from a director asking whether personal matters were becoming a distraction. The board's patience, always thin, now felt razor sharp. Late that afternoon, Lucas wandered out to the patio where Sophia sat alone. "Will we have to leave?" he whispered. Sophia hugged him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, promising, "Not if I can help it, sweetheart." She watched the late sun dip toward the ocean, shadows growing long across the guest house garden, and tried to steady her nerves for whatever might come next. As dusk fell, Michael lingered in his office, staring at an old photograph. His daughter, caught mid-laugh, hair wild in the Malibu wind. He remembered her voice echoing down the halls, the way her absence turned every room cold. He knew grief, knew the shape of it better than most. In that quiet, with only the sound of distant waves and the weight of the attorney's warning. Michael felt the past pressing in, making the walls of the estate seem closer. Downstairs. Linda packed her things, pausing to look back at Sophia with a reassuring nod. "We'll fight this," she promised. As her car disappeared down the drive, Sophia realized the worst wounds didn't always bleed, they lingered, waiting for someone to finally face them. The letter arrived with the city seal embossed on the envelope, the kind of paper that stiffens your back before you even know what it says. Sophia read it twice, then folded it so neatly the crease looked pressed by a machine. It summoned her to appear in court at the Stanley Moss Courthouse, downtown Los Angeles, for a hearing about Lucas's custody. There was no question of postponing or asking for special treatment. She would go, even if her hands shook. When Michael read the letter over her shoulder, his first instinct was to offer to come along, but Sophia refused, gently but firmly. She'd learned that in some rooms, you have to walk in alone if you want to walk out whole. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and misty. Sophia dressed with care, smoothing the one good blouse she owned, and cleaning Lucas's shoes until they looked new. Every detail was a shield against the silent judgments she knew would wait in those marble halls. Michael watched from the porch as she left, Lucas's hand in hers, the moment heavy with a kind of respect he hadn't shown before. The courthouse was alive with motion, families waiting, attorneys in crisp suits, bailiffs calling names, in the waiting area. Sophia recognized other mothers and fathers clutching files, hope and dread written across their faces. Linda Cho met her at the security line, her presence steadying. They sat side by side outside Department 63, the minutes ticking past in quiet tension. Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler. The judge, silver-haired and solemn, greeted each attorney with the same calm. The lawyer for the anonymous complainant was smooth, clinical. He listed Sophia's instability, no permanent address, unorthodox living situation, the questionable environment of the Reed estate. His voice dripped with the implication that anyone new to Malibu was, by default, a risk. He held up the anonymous notes, the HOA's records, even a printout of neighborhood message boards filled with rumor and speculation. Linda responded with facts, her tone respectful but unyielding. She presented documentation, employment contracts, letters from teachers at Venice Public Elementary praising Lucas's progress, references from former employers who vouched for Sophia's work ethic. She spoke about the guest house job, the effort Sophia put into turning the place around, and about Lucas's attendance and recent improvement at school. The principal's letter described a boy who arrived shy and left each day a little bolder. Sophia answered the judge's questions herself. Her voice wavered only once when she was asked about Lucas's father. She told the truth. She did not hide from the story that brought her to Los Angeles, nor did she exaggerate her hardships. "I am not perfect," she said quietly, "but I have never failed my son. I won't start now." In the gallery, Michael sat 2 rows behind, silent, his presence a signal of solidarity if not a shield. The hearing paused for a recess. In the hallway, Sophia's knees almost gave out. She sat on a bench, staring at her hands, breathing through the ache of being judged, of having every choice dissected. Michael found her there, sitting in his tailored suit, looking suddenly older. He didn't say much, just put his hand over hers, steady, letting her know he was there. Back inside, the judge returned with a short, clear ruling. Lucas would remain in his mother's custody, provided she continued her employment and could prove his well-being. The judge added that any further complaints would be taken seriously, but there was no reason, at least for now, to doubt Sophia's intentions or ability. The words landed like water in a desert. That evening, Sophia and Lucas returned to the estate. The staff who had once watched her with suspicion now greeted her with a nod, sometimes even a smile. Mrs. Evans offered extra biscuits for Lucas's supper. The tension in the house shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a room after the storm has passed, but the memory of thunder still lingers. Sophia stood in the garden, dusk falling, watching Lucas chase the first fireflies of the season. She knew peace was never permanent, but for the first time, she felt the ground beneath her feet was her own. The kitchen lights flickered on, and voices called her in from the dark. The air in the Reed estate felt tight after the hearing. Every sound in the hallways somehow sharper, every look exchanged just a bit more guarded. Michael kept himself busy with calls and paperwork, his movements clipped, refusing to let anyone see just how close the neighborhood's campaign had come to tearing a hole through his fragile household. Sophia noticed it first, in the way Lucas hung back before going outside, as if even the gardens had turned unfriendly overnight. Sophia tried to keep life as normal as possible. She managed the guest house accounts, took Lucas to the little park by the ocean, baked bread for the staff on Sundays. Yet, under the surface, there was a new tension, a fear that the smallest thing could tip everything back into chaos. Mrs. Evans started locking the kitchen at night, and the handyman, Pete, stopped whistling as he worked. Trust had grown scarce. One afternoon, Sophia sat at the guesthouse desk, sorting through a pile of receipts. It was an ordinary task, one she'd done a dozen times before, but as she checked the numbers, a pattern emerged, small sums missing, odd transfers listed under vague descriptions, 2 sets of invoices that didn't match. She checked again, heart thumping. These were not mistakes. Someone had been quietly draining money from the estate, hiding the theft in the confusion of renovation expenses. For a long moment, she debated what to do. Trouble had always come quickly for outsiders, and it was easy to imagine how this might be twisted against her. But the risk of silence felt worse. Gathering her courage, Sophia brought the papers to Michael in his office. He listened in silence, growing paler with each page. When she finished, he didn't say a word. He reached for his phone and called Linda Cho. Linda arrived that evening, briefcase in hand, and took over the desk with a quiet efficiency that left Sophia oddly reassured. Within hours. Linda traced the trail. The discrepancies all pointed to Mr. Parker, Michael's trusted estate lawyer. The evidence was clear. Parker had been funneling funds for months and leaking damaging rumors to the Homeowners Association to deflect suspicion. The pieces fit with brutal clarity. Michael's anger was ice cold. He confronted Parker in the study, voice low but sharp enough to cut. The argument echoed down the marble hallway. Sharp words about loyalty, about what Malibu used to be. Parker didn't deny it. He spoke with the careless arrogance of someone who believed he was defending tradition, that people like Sophia would ruin everything their kind had built. For a heartbeat, Michael's face twisted with the urge to shout, but he stopped himself. He simply told Parker to leave. "You're finished here," he said, voice flat as stone. "And if you try anything further, I'll see you in court." Parker left without looking back, his footsteps echoing like a warning. The household felt the aftershock. Michael seemed older, sitting at his desk late into the night, head in his hands. The staff huddled in corners, whispering about what would happen next. Sophia checked on Lucas, who asked, "Are we going to have to leave now?" Sophia brushed his hair back, hugged him close, and told him no matter what happened, they would stand their ground together. Later. Sophia sat in her small room. The papers that had changed everything still spread on her desk. The cost of truth was steep, maybe steeper than she'd imagined. The sense of victory was thin, barely more than a whisper in a house that still bristled with old wounds. As the house settled into uneasy quiet, Sophia found herself staring at the darkness outside, wondering if sunlight could ever truly reach all the way in. Word of Parker's firing did not stay contained within the estate walls. By the next morning, it seemed the entire Malibu neighborhood was buzzing. Mrs. Kim was seen pacing her driveway on the phone, and the Homeowners Association wasted no time. By lunchtime, an official letter arrived, dense with legal phrasing, questioning Michael's compliance with community rules. Staff tiptoed around the kitchen, glancing at each other in silent worry. Even the mail carrier handed Sophia the day's deliveries with a muttered, "Tough week." As if he too was bracing for a storm. Inside Reed Estate, pressure mounted from every direction. Michael fielded sharp emails from Reed Tech's board. The company's stock price had slipped, and investors wanted answers. Their message was blunt focus on business or step aside. Michael tried to juggle at all hours, locked in conference calls, reviewing spreadsheets late into the night, snapping at staff for trivial mistakes. The distance between him and the rest of the house grew, a gulf that widened each time he closed his office door. Sophia kept to the background, feeling the invisible weight of being the outsider that everyone blamed, but no one addressed directly. She packed Lucas's school lunch, cleaned the guest house, and kept her head down. Still, she sensed the tension from every side. Pete, the handyman, fixed the garden lights with a stiff jaw. Mrs. Evans avoided small talk. Even Lucas grew quiet, asking Sophia if she was sad when she thought he couldn't hear. Michael and Sophia collided one evening in the foyer, the strain of the week finally snapping. Michael, voice tight, demanded to know what she'd told Parker, why her presence seemed to draw trouble, why his life was unraveling at the seams. His words stung, cutting through weeks of careful understanding. Sophia shot back, her own anger burning through her usual restraint. She reminded him she never asked for any favors, never wanted to be a symbol for anyone's charity or rebellion. "I'm here for my son. That's all I ever wanted," she said, her voice trembling but steady. The silence after the argument was deeper than any before. Michael retreated to his office, but didn't work. He sat at his desk in the dark, staring at old photographs, grief and regret chasing each other in circles. Sophia went to her room and found Mrs. Evans waiting at the door with a cup of tea. For the first time, Mrs. Evans spoke about her own first months in Malibu, how she'd scrubbed floors and counted tips, afraid every day would be her last. Her words weren't grand or comforting, just honest. "None of us really belong here, not at first." That confession, simple as it was, helped. Sophia sat for a long time at her window, watching the moon glimmer on the waves, and let her anger soften into something more useful. She would not let fear or pride drive her out. Downstairs. Michael roamed the empty kitchen, wrestling with the aftermath of things said and unsaid. He replayed his conversation with Sophia, each harsh word echoing louder in the stillness. Just before midnight, the whole house startled at the sound of a heavy knock on the front door. Pete answered, and a process server in a suit handed over a thick envelope. Eyes barely meeting Michael's as he recited his line, "You've been served." The summons was official. The HOA was suing Michael for violating the neighborhood covenants, accusing him of harboring non-members and threatening fines, even eviction. The papers landed on the kitchen table with a dull thud. No one moved, not even Lucas, who stood at the top of the stairs in pajamas, silent and wide-eyed. The last shred of safety, Sophia realized, now hung by a thread thinner than she'd ever known. The morning of the hearing broke gray and cool, the sky smeared with low clouds that promised rain by evening. Sophia woke early, nerves jangling, and dressed Lucas in his neatest shirt. The two ate breakfast in near silence, the weight of the day hanging heavy. Across the main house, Michael prepared in his own way, suit pressed, voice practiced, but a little raw. Linda Cho arrived, briefcase in hand and an encouraging nod for Sophia. Mrs. Evans surprised them all, standing by the door in her best Sunday jacket, ready to testify if needed. The Malibu Community Center was already crowded when they arrived. Homeowners filtered in, voices low, glances sharp. Rows of polished chairs filled the hall, the air thick with anticipation. At the front sat the association board, faces set with the authority of people unused to being challenged. Parker, dismissed, but now returned as the association's counsel, looked over his notes with a cold satisfaction. The hearing opened with a formal recitation of rules. The HOA's case was methodical, almost surgical. Community integrity was their refrain safety. Reputation, the right to control who entered their world. When Parker rose, his arguments were laced with phrases that, while never using Sophia's name directly, painted a picture of danger, disorder, and intrusion. Lucas, sitting close to Sophia, squeezed her hand tighter each time Parker spoke. When it was Michael's turn, he set aside his prepared remarks. He began simply, voice steady but thick with years of loss. He told them of his daughter, of the years spent behind locked gates, and the loneliness that money could never mend. He described how, in Sophia and Lucas, he saw not a threat, but a second chance to create a home, one built on trust, not exclusion. "We talk about integrity," he said, "but real integrity isn't about locking people out. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you." There was a hush in the room that hadn't been there before. Then Mrs. Evans stood, voice clear and unwavering. She told them how Lucas's laughter had brought life back to the house, how Sophia's honesty had lifted a weight she didn't realize she'd been carrying. Others followed Pete, the handyman, offering a few halting words. Even a neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, surprised herself by recounting how Sophia had helped her when her car wouldn't start one rainy evening. The board retired to deliberate. In the waiting room, time dragged. Michael and Sophia sat side by side, the unspoken fear that all of this could be lost, stretching between them. Mrs. Evans poured styrofoam cups of bitter coffee, her hands shaking more than she let on. After nearly an hour, the board returned. Their verdict was measured. Michael could keep his guests, provided he accepted legal responsibility for any future disputes. But there was a cost. He would lose his seat on the executive committee, a position he'd held for years. For a moment, no one moved. Then Michael nodded, slow and certain. As they left the hall, Sophia felt her heart pounding, not from dread, but from a quiet, growing pride. They had not only survived, they had been seen. The line between outsider and insider was thinner now, a little blurred in the gray Malibu light. Michael held the door open, and for the first time, it felt like a gesture that might last. Lucas tugged at Sophia's sleeve, asking if they could go to the beach now that the clouds had finally broken. The morning broke clean and warm, sun pouring over the tiled roofs of the Reed estate. There was a hush that felt different, less like tension, more like a breath finally let go. Sophia made her way through the guest house, checking lists, refilling soap bottles, folding towels as Lucas ate breakfast by the window. His face was different now, open and bright, the lines of worry smoothed out by the promise of something safe. At school drop-off, he ran to his friends, calling back over his shoulder, no longer afraid of whispers or sideways glances. Back at the estate, the routines reasserted themselves, but something underneath had shifted. Michael spent more time at home, sometimes reading on the patio, sometimes watching Lucas chase the dog through the garden. The staff greeted Sophia by name, little gestures and extra plate at lunch. A quiet "let me help with that," replacing the stiff silences of those first weeks. The neighbors who had once turned away in the street now offered cautious hellos, and a few even asked about the guest house project, curiosity softening into something like respect. At work, Michael's steadiness returned. He answered every call, faced his board, and found that when he stood his ground, not out of anger, but conviction, they listened. The company's numbers steadied, but it was the quiet at home that marked the real change. No more late-night arguments, no more slamming doors. He and Sophia didn't try to force new boundaries or give things names they weren't ready for. Instead, they learned to share space coffee at the kitchen island, quiet walks by the cliffs at sunset, the silent comfort of someone else breathing in the same room. Lucas, once shy and guarded, became a fixture of estate life. He picked oranges with Mrs. Evans, built forts with Pete, drew pictures for the kitchen staff. His laughter traveled easily, unself-conscious, as if the house itself had been waiting for the sound. There were hard days, still a look from an old board member, a passing comment at school, but they didn't last the way they used to. Trust took root in small things, a borrowed book returned, a promise kept, a hand offered when someone stumbled. One evening, as clouds gathered over the ocean, Lucas asked Michael if he would ever leave again. The question hung between them, heavy with all the times before. Michael knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "I'm here now. That's what matters," he said. Lucas nodded and didn't let go of his hand until the rain started falling outside, soft and sure. Sophia watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself, not out of fear but habit. The old urge to scan the horizon for danger had faded, replaced by the simple rhythm of her new life. The house behind her glowed with light voices rising, laughter floating out into the dusk. For the first time in years, she let herself believe it would last. No one talked much about belonging anymore. They just lived it day by day, meal by meal, gesture by gesture. Forgiveness wasn't a grand statement, but a quiet letting go of what couldn't be fixed. Acceptance was not a victory march, but the slow, ordinary courage of showing up again tomorrow. When the next storm rolled over the hills and rain drummed the rooftops, Sophia watched her son splash barefoot in the driveway, Michael waving from the steps, and realized they had found what truly remained, not in status or protection, but in the act of being seen and choosing to stay out on the porch. The evening breeze carried the sound of laughter, quiet, ordinary, the kind that slips by unnoticed. Maybe nothing big had shifted in the world outside, but inside, something steady and gentle had taken root. Sometimes all it takes is one person staying, even when the doors feel closed, for old fears to loosen their hold. The past lingered, but so did hope woven through each small kindness, each silent promise. Perhaps that's how we find our place, not in grand gestures or easy answers, but in the spaces where we're finally seen. And when the rain comes again, who knows whose hand we'll find waiting in the dark.